After winning only 14 games, the Detroit Pistons must make roster changes this offseason, but there's plenty of ways they can go about it. We're going to talk about a couple of the options, as well as a front office update in just a moment.
Lane, sky's a jam. Dynamite dunk and the crowd loves it.
Welcome back to Pistons Intellect. I'm your host, Jack Kelly. You can follow me on Twitter at Jack_Kelly_313. You can also follow us on Instagram at Pistons_Intellect. And as always, if you're feeling so kind, please hit that subscribe button. Now, today we got an article from The Athletic from James Edwards III, who's the Pistons beat writer, who you're all familiar with. And he wrote an article in collaboration with John Hollinger, who's a columnist for The Athletic. He's also the man who invented the stat PER, and which led him to get a role in the front office with the Memphis Grizzlies for some years there with that grit and grind Grizzlies team in the 2010s. Now, they come up with an article, which I will put in the description here, basically outlining 3 potential ways the Pistons can resculpt their roster and really overhaul their roster after, as I mentioned off the top, a 14-win disastrous season. So the Pistons, as I discussed on the last video, they need to make changes everywhere. We have currently a front office decision looming, which I'll get to later, but there needs to be changes in the front office, the roster, and we could see changes to the entire coaching staff once this front office decision is made. But in terms of the roster itself, the article went through 3 ways the Pistons can use all their assets this offseason with 3 different types of scenarios. Now, I'm not going to read all 3. I've got 2 here, and one of those as well I'm going to put my own spin on. But the Pistons basically have $64 million in cap space, which is will be the most in the NBA. They have pick 5. I believe they still owe a pick to the Knicks, which conveys in 2027. But from then on, I believe they can trade future picks. Could be wrong. But a lot of their assets come with the young players they have. They have a team option, I believe, on Evan Fournier for around $15 million, which is for next season, which is basically, if they accept that, it'll just be to trade him to another team. But a lot of their assets come with their young players in this year's draft pick. So the first trade suggestion, which I'm going to bring up on the screen here, and first scenario, which James and John Hollinger outlined, was basically a swing for the fences. Now, in this situation, and I just want to quickly say, James specifically mentioned that none of this is really with reporting per se, as in the trades and the details with the trades, but these are potential players that could be available. We've heard stuff about Brandon Ingram being available and his impending free agency next summer. He wants an extension now. He only has 1 year left. Jeremy Grant's he's in a situation similar to how he was with the Pistons with Portland, where he just signed a big extension. I think he has around 3 years left, around $120 million, something like that. So the Blazers could be looking to get off him as they retool and rebuild. And then Valanciunas here is also a free agent. So the names that we're going to discuss are all players that James kind of said he's heard could be on the move this season, and kind of just makes sense. So in this situation here, the Pistons receive Brandon Ingram, Jonas Valanciunas, and Jeremy Grant. The Pelicans receive Jalen Duren and the number 5 overall pick. Portland get Jaden Ivey to pair with Scoot Henderson, Evan Fournier, which is basically just salary filler, and the number 21 overall pick from the Pelicans. Now, basically, Detroit send out Ivy, Duran, number 5 pick, and get back 3 starting level players and 2 very enticing wings in Grant and Ingram, and then Valanciunas, who in the regular season is a very good starting center, just in terms of production, scoring ability. He's added the 3 ball over his career, but more so just his ability to score around the rim and in the mid-range. Whilst his game, some might say, is a little bit outdated, he's managed to be very productive with New Orleans and on a team like the Pistons, who, they're not even thinking playoffs right now. They just need to think of how can we get a functional team out there that can win 30 to 40 games. A guy like Valanciunas helps you do that. He was on that Memphis team with rookie Ja Morant, and like a sophomore, Jaren Jackson Jr. Ultimately, they made a trade to get Steven Adams in to get them to get them to the playoffs and to help them advance in the playoffs. But Valanciunas is a really solid center. So here's my quick take on this. I'm open to trading Durant Ivy number 5 pick. Now I'm going to get to what my preferred offseason is for the Pistons, but I'm open to anything after what we just witnessed. Apart from Cade Cunningham, and if you want to group Asar Thompson in there, I can see that. Detroit, no one should really be safe on this roster. You don't just accidentally win 14 games. You can blame the coaching, sure. The roster was set up probably to fail, but 14 wins, like in year 4 of a rebuild, like something's off there. You can't bring back, or it's hard to bring back every single player. So I'm okay with moving Durant and Ivy and the number 5 pick if you are getting back Brandon Ingram, Jeremy Grant, and Valanciunas, who I think in this situation, Valanciunas is kind of like a sign and trade, or maybe you sign him with free agency. But, the one issue or thing that scares me about trading for Ingram is not only is he on an expiring deal, but he's looking for an extension around 4 years, $200 million, which the Pelicans aren't willing to offer him. Believe that's the max he can get. Now, I'm not saying, I think the Pistons should be trying to get Brandon Ingram. I think I'm fine with that. He would help tremendously. The reason I get worried is the injuries. And so it's, if you actually could get Brandon Ingram, say you actually do get him and you do extend him, he's a guy who's missed a ton of time. Now, I'm not saying that would mean no, don't do it, but it's just a concern of mine. I also would be concerned if they trade for him and they can't get an extension done, because you don't want Brandon Ingram, to start next season, not sign long term, and you get 20 games in. I think I spoke about this on the last podcast, but you don't want that kind of drama surrounding your team in the lead up to the deadline, because if the Pistons were to make this trade and say basically the depth chart that James has here is basically the Pistons starting lineup would be something like Cade, Asar Thompson, Brandon Ingram, Jeremy Grant, Valanciunas, and then off the bench you'd have Sasser, Grimes, Chetty Osman, who you would sign as a vet minimum, Fontecchio, Isaiah Stewart, Reggie Bullock. I think that's a solid team. I think that's definitely a play-in to low playoff team in terms of talent in the East especially. But it might take a while to gel, and I'd just be nervous those first 20 to 30 games of Brandon Ingram if things aren't looking great. His eyes might start to wander and maybe you could lose him. That'd be my only concern. But I get you got to take risk in this game. So I think whilst my preferred pathway isn't to swing for the fences and trade a ton of stuff, which I know will annoy some people, I would be okay with this. It's very close for me, these two scenarios I'm going to outline. And even though swinging for the fences and, like I said, trading everything is kind of not the direction I'm leaning right now, if you could actually get this back, I would probably do that. I think the reason I don't lean towards swing for the fences is because I don't think the Pistons can get this return. This seems like getting 2 wings, in Jeremy Grant and Brandon Ingram, 6'8", massive wingspans. Ingram can create in the mid-range. Jeremy Grant can shoot the 3, also create a little bit in the mid-range. 2 rangy wings like Jeremy Grant at the 4. Whilst Valanciunas isn't the best defending at the 5 in terms of just rim protection, he's a great rebounder. Jeremy Grant, we saw him with the Pistons. He could help with that weak side rim protection. And then you still keep Isaiah Stewart as your backup 5, which I think would be exceptional, because not only can he space now as a pick and pop 5-man to play alongside Asar Thompson, but he's a decent rim protector and an elite rim protector off the bench for sure. An elite defensive big off the bench, Isaiah Stewart. Even though he's undersized, he would be one of the best backup centers in the league if that was just the role the Pistons put him in full time. So, yeah, I would do this trade in a heartbeat. I just don't think it's possible. I just can't see I think the Pelicans can get more for Ingram than that. I feel like the Pelicans might even want Stewart more than Durant, as crazy as that sounds. I think fits alongside Zion better than Durant, just in terms of the way he can space, the way he's more versatile defensively. He's nowhere near as good a rebounder as Durant, but he's not bad. So maybe if you switch Stu, and I just don't think that's enough for the Pelicans. And then for the Portland, they've got Scoot. They've just done the 2-point guard thing or 2 lead guard thing with Dame and CJ. Didn't really get them too far. It made them like a decent team, but Ivy and Scoot. I think it's. I don't want to be so adamant about this, but I don't think they're going to be Damian Lillard. I think if one of them could become CJ McCollum level type of player, that would probably be a success. So I don't know. With their new front office, I'm not sure that's the direction they would go in. So I would do this trade. I kind of feel like it doesn't make sense for the Pelicans and Blazers, but hey, I would do this. So let me know your thoughts. Interested to hear your thoughts and whether or not you would do this. Now, the next trade or the next scenario, I should say, that James and Hollinger discussed was basically going all in on free agency. So in their scenario, they had Pistons signing Malik Monk at around 23 to 25 million annually, Tobias Harris on a similar value, and then Valanciunas once again around that mid-level exception. And in this scenario, the Pistons keep their young players. They keep pick 5. And basically your depth chart would be a starting lineup of Cade, Malik Monk, Asar Thompson at the 3, Tobias at the 4, Valanciunas at the 5. And then the backup lineup is basically Ivy, Grimes, Fontecchio, Isaiah Stewart, and Jalen Duren. Now, I think I lean a bit more to this. And that's only because I don't think that first scenario is possible. But in this scenario here, I would like to think Malik Monk is probably going to be like a 3 to 4 year deal for him to even just get him out of Sacramento. And then Tobias, I don't mind, and I've said this on previous episodes, I don't mind paying Tobias 20 to 25 million annually, as long as it's only on like a 2-year deal. Something short term. Once it gets above 2 years, that's where I start to get concerned because the trade flexibility isn't as great. Tobias is only 31, still has good basketball ahead of him, but I just wouldn't be comfortable locking him in for more than 2 years because at least if you've got him on a 2-year deal, once it becomes an expiring contract, it's much easier to trade next summer. And then Valanciunas, I've kind of spoken about him and the value he could bring. I think for me, I would probably be trying to sign a guy like if you can keep Stewart in this instance, I would probably be looking to sign more of a rim protector because if you're not getting Jeremy Grant, like the reason I don't mind Valanciunas and Jeremy Grant in the previous scenario is because you still have Isaiah Stewart as well, who Stewart and Grant can help out with some rim protection near Valanciunas. If the Pistons just have this and their 2 centers of Valanciunas and Duren, who are going to play all the minutes at the 5, the rebounding will be great. I get a little bit worried about the rim protection. But maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe this isn't for a team like the Pistons. That's not the biggest issue. But here you can still take a swing with that pick 5. And I'm still very early in my draft stuff. But maybe I'm falling for the kind of the yearly Pistons fan routine of falling in love with prospects. But I'm all for trading the pick still. But I kind of don't mind this where you can get 3. Like I think Malik Monk's a starting level talent for the Pistons, 100%. You get 3 starting level players here using your cap space, and then you keep all your young pieces. I'm still not out on Jaden Ivey. I'm tiptoeing out the door on Ivy and Cade working together. But if Jaden Ivey's coming off the bench next season, backing up Cade Cunningham and playing behind Malik Monk, then I wouldn't mind seeing how he goes. But if it, like, because something I spoke about on the Res Ball podcast with Steve Palladio was the thing with Ivy that upset a lot of fans last season with him coming off the bench was the fact it was behind Killian Hayes. So if he's behind Malik Monk and Kate Cunningham, I have no issues with him growing in that bench role, because when you look at the numbers, he was actually more efficient coming off the bench. He was a better scorer off the bench. It was when he was put into a larger role, he struggled, and that's a concern, don't get me wrong. But at least if you still have Ivy, you give him a chance to grow in year 3. Ideally, he becomes that starting level 2. But if he doesn't, he might be balling out on the bench, and another team might see the value in him, and there might be a team like, say, just say really, really bad example. Say like the Chicago Bulls next season, for some inexplicable reason. Or hang on, maybe the Chicago Bulls, they're middling. Once again, as always, they're around that 10th seed, get 30 games in, and say they see Jaden Ivey playing really well coming off the bench, they need a point guard. What if they would look to him and say, well, let's trade Jaden Ivey, he's playing well off the bench. The Pistons improve Ivey's trade value, because that's the thing. His trade value is the lowest it's ever been right now. So if you bring him off the bench next season, and same with Duran, but more so with Ivy, I think, because I think he's got the highest ceiling. You can build his value back up. A team like the Bulls might go, all right, we're done. Let's bottom out this season. Let's try to get Jaden Ivey, give him a go in his 3rd season as our lead point guard. They give you assets. Pistons get future picks back and maybe a role player from the Bulls. Like, that's just one scenario I can see where keeping Jaden Ivey isn't the worst thing if you can find a guy like Malik Monk to start at the 2. So, yeah, kind of gone on a little bit there, but that's why I also don't mind this and keeping these young guys, because I think, as I said, Jalen Duran and Jaden Ivey in particular, after their rookie seasons, their value was here. They both made all rookie teams. Their value was super high. Their value couldn't be lower right now. After this Pistons season and the way they look to kind of close the season, I think there's still value in building their value back up, and either they take those starting role positions some point next season, you just keep developing them, or another team wants to take a chance on them or wants to capitalize on them in a new environment, and the Pistons get assets back for them. So that's why I don't mind just spending cap space and keeping young pieces. I know some people are going to hate that, and that's completely understandable. I think both scenarios I've just outlined, it's close for me. I think if either of these scenarios panned out and the players that I've just spoke about, the Pistons were able to get, I think no matter what, they're going to be a much better team. Like, even if you don't like Tobias Harris, or even if you don't like Valanciunas, I think adding them helps the Pistons instantly. It's just obviously about the contracts making sense for Detroit. But I really enjoyed this article from James. There's a heap more in there. The link will be in the description for you to check out. So let me know your thoughts on both scenarios. I've spoken a bit on this, probably a bit too long, but love to hear your thoughts on these scenarios. Now, finally, before we get out of here, over the weekend, the Vince Goodwill, who was previously a Pistons beat writer with the Detroit News, he's now with Yahoo Sports. Him and Jake Fisher dropped an article with an update on the Pistons president of basketball operations search. Now, just going to read you a couple of quotes here, and then I'll give you my thoughts. Basically, Vince detailed, Trajan Langdon, Scott Perry, Dennis Lindsay, and John Hammond have impressed in interviews and are frontrunners to meet with Pistons owner Tom Gores, as the franchise hopes to fill the position before next month's NBA draft. Now, for some context and a reminder on who these 4 candidates are, Langdon is currently the New Orleans Pelicans general manager. Scott Perry recently held the general manager title for the New York Knicks, I believe up until 2022, and is currently an ESPN analyst. Dennis Lindsay is his advisor for the Dallas Mavericks and previously the Utah Jazz GM. And John Hammond is a senior advisor with the Magic to GM Jeff Weltman. So they also mentioned stuff in there about Tim Connolly and the Nuggets, the Timberwolves, but it seems like the Pistons aren't going to get a chance to talk to him until the Timberwolves season is done. So Timberwolves obviously advanced to the Western Conference Finals, which means it's going to be at least, I would say, another 10 days before the Pistons could talk to him in terms of like from a is legal the right word? But like I'm sure there might have been conversation. Like, I don't think they can officially talk to him until the season's over. Correct me if I'm wrong there. Basically, it just feels like until the Wolves season's over, they can't talk to Tim Connolly. Now, it's interesting because the Pistons, clearly, Tim Connolly, it feels like he's their number one guy. But they're in this ridiculous kind of position again where they kind of were with their coach last year, where they were holding out for Monty or they didn't like their candidates. And then, as we all know, Tom Gore swooped in and got Monty. But it's kind of like that again, where this is just dragging out. And this, more so than even the coach, is way more important. They need to get this sorted out ASAP, in my opinion. All four of those guys I've just listed, they might not be the sexiest names like Tim Connolly, who's come from the Nuggets, but like, and is currently with Tim Wolves, but they all sound like great candidates. Like, honestly, even Scott Perry, like, he helped build this Knicks team they currently have. Langdon, currently the Pelicans GM. Like, I'm sure he was a huge hand in helping David Griffin build that team. Dennis Lindsay, like, think about the Jazz. Like, it feels like they've been good for just like solid to good for a long time. I know they probably had some lean years in the early 2010s, but they were rebuilding. And then, Hammond with the Bucks and now the Magic. But look at how the Magic have gone. Hammond was there to help draft Giannis. Like, I feel like every one of these guys all have their hits and they'll have their misses. And like, it just, all four of these candidates, I'd be happy if they're hired. Like, truly, none of these guys scare me. Like, and the reason they need to hurry up is because the NBA draft is in 1 month. And the Pistons season has now been done for about 5 weeks, I would say. And we don't know what's going on with Troy Weaver. Haven't heard from Monty Williams since the final press conference of Game 82. Like, we just haven't heard anything. So who's making these decisions? I know they have scouts and that kind of thing for the draft who will help inform whoever takes over this role on who to take. But like, just with the free agency and stuff, it just feels like it's been left once again to whoever's in this front office right now to make these decisions. And it's just weird. Whoever this new person is, I want them to come in and not be, the key thing I saw here was the franchise hopes to fill the position before next month's NBA draft. Hopes. So it's not like the franchise plans to or will. It's hopes. Like, how can you go into the draft without, a clearly defined structure? Like, because it moves quickly. It goes NBA draft, free agency is like a week later, then it's summer league, and then it's, training camp's the next thing. So it's like, who's assembling this roster? Like, I want whoever, like, this offseason, I've said this the past 2 off seasons, but this offseason is the most important offseason ever for this rebuild in the last 5 years. Like, because if you stuff it up, like, you just can't have, like, you stuff it up, you'll have what you had last season. And I don't even want to think about how that could occur. So you need someone in, like, I would love if this is announced tomorrow or no later than the next week, because whoever comes in, I feel like they need a 2-week runway before the draft to figure out what they're doing with Troy Weaver, figure out what they're doing with Monty Williams, because from the reports we've heard, neither of those guys are safe. Like, Troy sounds like he's definitely not going to be the GM, but like, what's his position in the organization? Monty, we've heard his job's not safe. What's the go there? The Pistons paying him out. What do they do with the rest of the coaching stuff? It's a strange situation. And this, more so than the coaching thing that dragged out last year, is more concerned. Like, I feel like this more timely. Like, we have the offseason coming up. It'd be like if the Pistons got fired Monty, then waited until 3 weeks before preseason games. Well, really, they waited until pretty much the preseason games kicking off to hire their coach, like 2 weeks out from the season. Like, it's just madness, absolute madness. So I really hope this gets done soon. That's kind of all I have on this. Obviously, Tim Connolly would be great if they could get him, but he's waiting for Tim Connolly until for another 3 weeks. Is that worth it for a guy? Like, I think it's less than a 5% chance they'd even get him. to be honest, especially with the way the Timberwolves are going. But you never know. But yeah, is it worth waiting for Conley another 3 weeks, 4 weeks? I don't know. Or is it worth getting one of these 4 guys who are all established in their own right and setting the foundations early before the draft, for one of the most important off seasons ever? Like, I lean that way. Keen to hear your thoughts. But until Friday, unless there's any breaking news, as always, go Pistons.